It won't surprise you to hear that I do some pretty devoted things where my comic books are concerned. For example, I have a spreadsheet where I rate every issue of Marvel Team Up out of 10 for the cover art and for the storyline. I can't believe I just admitted that. Anyway, the point is, I gave this the joint lowest rating for the storyline out of the entire series, just 4 out of 10. For that reason alone, I'm not going to review it. But, just so that you know, it's the second part of the Doctor Strange tale in which Satana, she of the plunging neckline, helps Spider-Man revert the Good Doctor back from his werewolf form to human. Then, unusually for a series that had so many one-and-done tales, we go from a 2-parter to an epic 4-part saga. There weren't many story arcs this long in this series, and this would prove to be the last. It started in issue 82, and it starred the Black Widow. Natasha Romanoff hadn't really had a steady home since the Champions disbanded at some point between issue 17 of that series and issue 17 of Peter Parker, the Spectacular Spider-Man. She had spent a bit of time with the Avengers, but not as much as she had in the past, and she'd spent a bit of time with Daredevil, but definitely not as much as she had with him before. We get some real consistency with these issues as well, in terms of the creative team. All 4 of them are written by the regular writer at this point, Chris Claremont, and art is provided by our pal Sal Buscema and Steve Leiloa. What's the betting that cover's misleading? This issue starts interestingly. We are following a young woman through the streets of New York. She passes an advert for that day's edition of the Daily Bugle. The headline screams, "Spider-Man Rex Museum," and we can see from the photo that the story is actually about his team-up with Red Sonja from issue 79. But the woman we are following is an entirely different redhead. She's a school teacher and she's lost. And she seems to have attracted some very unwanted company. The thugs begin to get a bit heavy-handed, and just as they are about to get what they want, they get something they didn't, because Spider-Man is there. With one of their number gone, Spider-Man gives the other 3 gang members the chance to leave. But all they can see is that they outnumber him 3-1, and they fancy their chances. Why do they always choose the hard way? As you probably predicted, Spidey has no trouble dealing with the other gang members. That is, until he steps on a treacherous patch of ice. Suddenly, down and stunned, the remaining gang member sees this as his opportunity to make his reputation. That is, until someone saves Spidey. It's the teacher, who seems to have a good knowledge of martial arts. And now, seeing the damage that she's done to that guy, she panics. She's not used to hurting people. Spidey sticks his belt torch on so he can get a good look at his saviour, and is shocked to see that it's the Black Widow. Or at least he thinks it is, because she says she doesn't recognise him, and she's certainly no widow. Then the stress and excitement of the situation proves too much for her, and she faints. When she regains consciousness, she doesn't know where she is or how she got there. But her friendly neighbourhood Spider-Man soon turns up to explain all. Plus, he accepts that she isn't the Black Widow, even though she does look remarkably like her. She tells him her name is Nancy Rushman. Russian? No, Rushman. And she's a teacher at an elementary school. Spidey asks her where she learnt to fight like that, but she doesn't know. In fact, she can't even remember at what school she teaches. Indeed, there is very little that she does remember about her life. And when Spidey pulls out the Black Widow's costume from her handbag, well, that just really confuses her. Because it isn't hers. It can't be. It mustn't. Spidey has an idea that may help to jog her memory. He says, "Look, this is going to sound real weird, but why don't you change into the widow's costume?" "Spidey, this is not the time nor the place." It doesn't help that she's trying it on in a rather sexy way. Spidey is hoping that if she is the Black Widow, putting on the costume will bring her memories back to her. However, despite it being a perfect fit, it doesn't feel right to Nancy. In fact, she says it feels almost indecent. Spidey says, "It looks real fine to me." "Spidey, we've spoken about this." Still, Nancy's memories fail to return. She says she understands what Spidey was trying to do with her and that costume. "I don't think you do." but she says she's going to change back into her own clothes and then she'd like him to take her to the nearest hospital. But it seems that whoever this woman is, someone has an interest in her and they have found her. It's none other than S.H.I.E.L.D. and maybe that trip to the hospital is going to be a good idea for both of them. Spider-Man doesn't stand a chance against these S.H.I.E.L.D. operatives whilst he's also trying to protect Nancy. So he picks her up and flees the scene. But the agents aren't going to give up that easily and they pursue the pair. Val leading this strike force, issuing the order to shoot to kill. Wow, maybe the cover wasn't misleading after all. Nancy is understandably very worried by what's going on, but the mere fact that S.H.I.E.L.D. want her so badly and apparently want her dead makes Spider-Man even more doubtful of her claims to be a teacher. With some deft web swinging, Spidey manages to put some distance between them and the S.H.I.E.L.D. operatives, but not for long, as they find themselves target practice once more. In fact, Spidey takes a hit, and with them now slowed down, one of the agents quickly catches them up. She seems convinced that Nancy is the Black Widow, even though she says their orders are to shoot her on sight. But Nancy, or whoever she is, isn't going without a fight, and those skills we've already seen in the alleyway come to the fore again. Well, let's hope she's got more where that came from, because another half a dozen S.H.I.E.L.D. agents are about to join them. Spidey begins to cause them issues, but then he is knocked down for the count, and the S.H.I.E.L.D. agents happily pile on. Nancy is watching from the shadows. Is she going to run, or is she going to fight? She's had enough of running today, and she happily leaps in to save Spidey's skin. Nancy says not only is she sick of running from S.H.I.E.L.D., but she's sick of running from herself. She needs to know who she is, school teacher or superheroine. And at that point, Spider-Man's spider sense is triggered. By Nick Fury. I would say, isn't he one of the good guys? But it does seem that S.H.I.E.L.D. have changed sides. This is confirmed when he shoots Nancy. Spidey sees the blood, feels that she's no longer breathing. She's dead, and Nick Fury is the man who killed her. What do you know? The cover was accurate after all. Mind you, the cover did say that Spider-Man was next, and, oh, I don't believe it. Nick Fury has killed Nancy and Spider-Man, and he tells his agents to clean away the mess. Well, the series continues for another 68 issues, so I'm guessing that at least one of our heroes isn't actually dead. Let's see if we can get some answers in issue 83, which co-stars Nick Fury. Mister, you got a lot of explaining to do. Looks like we also get Silver Samurai and Boomerang. I've never been a fan of Silver Samurai. It just seems a bit silly to me, whereas Boomerang is perfectly sensible. We begin with the end of Spider-Man's life, as it is confirmed that he is dead. In fact, murdered. That is until you turn the page, when we are told that actually he's alive. They tell us, lucky for us, things aren't quite what they seem. Seem? Seem? We weren't making assumptions here. You said he was murdered. But no, he is alive, and we can also safely assume that Nancy is alive too. Peter concludes that Nick Fury must have used anaesthetic bullets. Oh yeah, that's what it will be. Mind you, there was talk of shoot to kill, and the fact that they tried to actually beat Spider-Man to death. I'm sure it'll be explained later. Actually, we don't have to wait long at all, because on the very next page we get one panel that answers most of the questions that we got from last issue. We are told that at some point before the last issue, the Black Widow called Nick Fury in a panic to warn him of some imminent disaster. Then she disappeared. Then when S.H.I.E.L.D. did find her, Val disobeyed orders. She was supposed to bring her in safely, but she decided to try to kill her. So some questions answered, some new ones posed. Meanwhile, Peter Parker, in the hopes of tracking down the Black Widow, is trying to find out where S.H.I.E.L.D's New York headquarters is. So he goes to the Bugle's chief librarian, Miss McCulloch, who says to him, look it up in the phone book. And much to his shock, there it is. Now all he needs to do is get into the place. It's in said headquarters that we find Dr. Ames, the man charged with overseeing Nancy's recovery. At least, that's what he should be doing, but after a rather suggestive phone call, it seems he's not looking out for his patient's best interests. Don't worry, she's perfectly capable of looking after herself. With that suggestive phone call, things are beginning to make sense. Now fully conscious, Nancy attempts to escape her confinement, but it's not long before she stumbles across another S.H.I.E.L.D. agent. A S.H.I.E.L.D. agent that doesn't hang around for long. You know, I keep forgetting that Sal Buscema provided the art for this story, which he did. He and Steve Leiloa were listed as artists on all 4 issues, with Sal's name coming first. Now I'm guessing that rather than Sal doing the pencils that Steve would then ink over later, that Sal actually provided the breakdowns. That is, the basic composition of each panel. And then Steve, yes, he would provide the inks, but he would also provide the detail, including the facial details. That's why it looks so much like Steve Leiloa's work and is missing those certain characteristics that we know so well from Sal's work. So Spidey and the Widow have been reunited, but they have also been discovered by a S.H.I.E.L.D. security patrol. Spidey knows that in her current Nancy Rushman guise, the Black Widow will only slow them down. So he does what any self-respecting Spider-Man would do and knocks her out. He then justifies it to himself by saying, at least while she's knocked out, I don't have to worry about her making a mistake or freaking out on me. Oh, well, that's fine then, isn't it? Well, it looks like his dubious plan has succeeded, as he makes it into the open air and freedom. We're at the halfway mark of the comic book now, and still no sign of the villains. Where? Oh, there they are. They are on the S.H.I.E.L.D. Helicarrier, which is in the safe hands of Clay Quartermain, who is speaking in a strange way, much like that doctor was earlier. We have a mysterious woman in the shadows, who he refers to as Commander, and yes, our 2 antagonists from the cover. They are being given a mission. Silver Samurai will use his teleportation ring to take them both to Manhattan, and once there, Boomerang will find the Black Widow and Spider-Man and kill them. Then our shadowy commander watches a news bulletin in which we are told that later that day, the President is going to address a joint session of Congress. The President? This is getting out of control. How's anyone going to find the Black Widow anyway? Well, Nick Fury has bugged her, so he can track her down. Unfortunately for him, one of the mind-controlled S.H.I.E.L.D. tech agents has bugged him, so now all that Boomerang has to do is follow Fury to find the Widow. And where is Nancy right now? She's in the pad of Peter Parker, where she's doing what she does best, regaining consciousness. Although her thoughts are now plagued with visions of her, or is it the Black Widow, being tortured. Tortured by, well. It's just as Peter is comforting her that Nick Fury's foot finds its way through his door. It seems they are both under arrest and have to come with him. But they don't even make it to the car before the car is totaled. Courtesy of Boomerang. Peter is obviously able to slip away in the confusion before quickly returning after a costume change. We then get a seesaw of a battle, as after a brief mid-air skirmish, Boomerang's boot jets blast Spidey across the street. Nancy catches him, breaking his fall. Boomerang destroys that ridiculous-looking gun of Nick Fury's, before Spider-Man finally gets the upper hand on him. But it seems we are forgetting someone, because the Silver Samurai then suddenly appears. Spidey says that he's using the teleport ring that he stole off John Belushi. We'll get to that. There's been enough fighting for one issue though, and the Samurai uses his ring to teleport himself and Boomerang away. Nancy still isn't sure exactly who she is, but some of her memories are returning, and as a result, she thinks she knows exactly where the villains are headed. Maybe we'll find out who the mystery villainess is in issue 84, an issue that features a guest star that we haven't seen before. Well, actually, he was in Giant Size Spider-Man, but I avoided reviewing that issue in that episode. It is Shang-Chi, the Master of Kung Fu. What did they do? Just randomly pick someone out of the handbook of the Marvel Universe? The first page summarises most of what we already know. We have our two villains, Clay Quatermain, still brainwashed, controlling the helicarrier. We have a reminder of the President's imminent speech, and still standing in the shadows is our mystery Villainous. But she will remain a mystery no longer, because someone has turned the lights on and we see in all her glory Viper. Then we get the flashback to end all flashbacks, which means that actually there's a few things that we need to talk about too. We get to see Steve Rogers in action, not as Captain America, but as Nomad, from the time when, having hung up the Captain America uniform, he still managed to scupper the Serpent Squad's latest plans. In that story, we saw the building collapse around Viper, but we never saw what happened to her after that. Now we do, as she managed to escape the scene by crawling through the sewers. She was not best pleased with this outcome and fled to Japan to recover and plot her revenge. She would bring down the United States, and she knew exactly how to do it. The first stage would be to use the hypnobeam on the various agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. At around the same time, she fell in with the Silver Samurai and sent him to America. Well, hold on. We've moved on from Captain America now. This all took place in issue 57 of Marvel Team Up. It was in that issue that Spider-Man first met Silver Samurai, and actually most of us did. He had only appeared once before that in an issue of Daredevil, but it seems that Chris Claremont quite liked the character and so began developing him over the years. Spider-Man would probably have died at the Samurai's hands were it not for Black Widow. It appeared that Silver Samurai was there to steal some kind of effigy, but now the Viper tells us that it was actually to steal the Cavorite crystal, something that would have powered her teleportation device. Of course, the Samurai's mission was thwarted by the heroes, and so Viper had to find an alternative source of power. That was it for a year or so, until issue 74 of Marvel Team Up. I thought I'd got away with not reviewing this silly issue. Unfortunately, it is integral to this storyline. In that issue, Spider-Man and the cast of Saturday Night Live faced off against Silver Samurai after the Viper's teleportation ring was accidentally posted to John Belushi. How contrived is that? She sent Silver Samurai to recover the ring, and despite the best efforts of Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd and the gang, he succeeded, escaping with the ring that was so integral to Viper's plans. Again, that story didn't lead anywhere, until now. I guess it's Chris Claremont doing his whole long-term planning thing. Either that or just making it up as he goes along. Viper then used the teleportation ring to get aboard the helicarrier and the hypnobeam to bring all of its crew under her command. Now it seems she's going to use the helicarrier to kill all of the most powerful people in the American government. Now, at the end of the last issue, Nancy Rushman said she reckoned she knew where Boomerang and Silver Samurai were headed. And she guessed correctly. So now she and the Web Swinger are making their way to the S.H.I.E.L.D. helicarrier. How are they getting there? Well, over the years, Spidey has made some pretty kooky creations with his webbing. Parachute is the classic. He's also made some skis in the past. Well, now he's made himself a hang glider. Although it seems that Nancy was given the real deal. Why so tight with the hang gliders, S.H.I.E.L.D.? Shortly after they touch down on the helicarrier's surface, the intensity of the situation goes to their heads, and Nancy and Spider-Man kiss. Player. The moment is interrupted by the sound of Nick Fury's air car arriving. He knows he's walking into a trap, but he is happy to spring it. Silver Samurai makes a good point here. He says, why are they even letting him land? Why not just destroy him in the air? But Viper reckons if S.H.I.E.L.D. are seen to shoot down Nick Fury, then the American authorities will know that something's up. So they're going to do it the sneaky way. As Nick Fury arrives, he really pushes his luck by turning his back on his armed enemies. But this is a calculated risk, because he has every faith in his surprise bodyguard. Do you know who it is? Well, there's a clue. All of the S.H.I.E.L.D. agents present are disabled by this hidden assailant, before, shortly after, Nick Fury joins them, being knocked unconscious by a boomerang. And that gives us a great opportunity to have a dramatic reveal of both Boomerang and Fury's companion. Yes, there's the proof in case you thought they wouldn't dare do it. And then we get actually a pretty good dynamic battle between these two that lasts for 3 pages. There are plenty of boomerangs flying around the place, and even the obligatory hi-ya. And at the end, it's Boomerang that is victorious. So in one battle, he's defeated Shang-Chi and Nick Fury. Pretty impressive. Meanwhile, Spider-Man and Black Widow have only just entered the helicarrier after fooling around on the surface for a while. And they aren't in there long before they have company. They aren't only joined by S.H.I.E.L.D. agents, but also Silver Samurai and Viper, the very sight of the femme fatale sending Nancy back into unconsciousness with a scream. Spider-Man asks Viper what she did to Nancy to make her react like that, and Viper just says she asked questions. The Black Widow refused to answer. And now it's time for the order to kill. Another order to kill. Because Viper's plans need to get in motion. And to ensure they go smoothly, she needs to ensure that no heroes are around to scupper them. Speaking of heroes, Boomerang has just turned up with Shang-Chi, who he describes as a Bruce Lee clone. Yeah, that's pretty much what Marvel's marketing department was going for. Viper then has a go at Boomerang for bringing Shang-Chi there, calling him a cretin and bumbling. That's a bit harsh, bearing in mind he did defeat Shang-Chi. The only problem is, he didn't defeat Shang-Chi. And that ain't Boomerang. Did somebody say psych? Shang-Chi was playing possum, and that was Nick Fury wearing Boomerang's outfit. We really need a flashback to show what happened there, don't we? But we don't get it. Instead, we just get a text box that explains that whilst Shang-Chi lay stunned by the explosion, Nick Fury, who wasn't as injured as he was pretending to be, dealt with Boomerang. Now Spider-Man joins in the chaos. But not Nancy. Viper doesn't care. She leaves them all to it, saying that whatever they do, they will still be too late to save the president. Naturally, Spider-Man doesn't like the sound of this. He begins to chase after her, but the Silver Samurai stands in his way. And with one deft stroke of his sword, he launches Spider-Man out of the helicarrier and plummeting to Earth. Imagine if you didn't have the next issue after a cliffhanger like that. Luckily, we do, and it's time to wrap this story up. No new characters in this one. Instead, all of the heroes get their names on the front cover. Far above the Earth, Spider-Man is falling to his doom. Within the helicarrier, the remaining heroes are fighting against the brainwashed agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Silver Samurai is in the heart of the action, and Viper is escaping. Or trying to, at least. Nancy Rushman has been through too much to allow her tormentor to escape. But she knows that if she pursues Viper, there will be no one else to save Spider-Man. And so she sacrifices her chance of revenge to save her friend. As you can imagine, there's a lot of action in this issue. That is if our heroes survive Viper's next attempt on their lives. Sealing herself off from them, she orders deadly gas to be pumped into their chamber. She is confident of its effectiveness, saying, "By now, Fury and his friend are helpless. And Spider-Man and the Black Widow have fallen to their well-deserved deaths. And they aren't the only ones. We already know that America's highest-ranking politicians are all gathered together. Now, Viper tells us that she's going to crash the S.H.I.E.L.D. helicarrier into the chamber where they are gathered, and then she and her revolutionary brothers and sisters will step up to take charge of the leaderless United States of America. And then she says the magic words, 'No power on earth can stop me now.' Well, I know at least 2 people who disagree with that. So a flashback maybe to explain how they survived the gas? No, another text box. Well, I suppose it isn't an exciting explanation. Not as exciting as the panel that it's on anyway. Apparently, Nick Fury led Shang-Chi through a maze of airtight passageways that had been designed for just such an occasion. Nick Fury takes Clay Quatermain out of the fight with a narco dart, but as Quatermain falls, his shot hits Fury, and the Colonel is down. The tide of battle seems to be turning in favour of the baddies. That is until we discover that even S.H.I.E.L.D's windows aren't immune to superheroics. Again, Viper makes her escape, and again Nancy wants to go after her, and this time there's nothing to stop her. And she's actually beginning to sound like the Black Widow. Rather than being held back by a hero, this time she's followed by one, as Spidey sends Shang-Chi after her, to ensure that if she does revert to Nancy Rushman, she'll be safe. And that leaves Spidey to play with Silver Samurai. And Silver Samurai don't play nice. Although Spider-Man does know that without his sword, the samurai is greatly disadvantaged. So, with a bit of web in the eye, the sword is made safe, and with a bit of acrobatics, the samurai is put to sleep. As for the Black Widow, it seems her psyche is alternating between that of her superhero persona and her schoolteacher alter ego. At that point, we get a flashback that shows us precisely what happened between her and Viper. She remembers discovering Viper's plans to take over the S.H.I.E.L.D. helicarrier. But before she had the chance to warn Nick Fury, she was betrayed courtesy of Viper's hypno-ray. Captured, Viper wanted to find out exactly what she knew, what she had told Nick Fury. But she wouldn't talk, no matter what torture Viper inflicted on her. To help survive the physical and mental anguish of the torture, her mind retreated and hid inside the persona of Nancy Rushman. Shang-Chi catches up to Black Widow just as they cross paths with Viper. She tries to shoot the Black Widow, but Shang-Chi pushes her out of the way, taking the bullet for her. Let me guess, he's dead. The Widow yells out, "You killed him!" Did she though? And now the Viper puts the final part of her plan into motion. Using her portable control module, she switches off the engines of the helicarrier, and then tossing the module overboard, she says that without it, there's no way the engines can be restarted. I bet there is. Within the helicarrier, Nick Fury and Spider-Man hear the engines fall silent. Assuming that Viper has booby-trapped the main control panel, Nick Fury says their only chance is to rewire the main trunk lines that are buried behind a wall of reinforced steel, which, when you have the proportionate strength of a spider, isn't as impenetrable as it sounds. I knew there'd be a solution. But it doesn't matter, because now we get a great showdown between the Black Widow and Viper at a most spectacular location. Because as the helicarrier begins to fall from the sky, our two action women battle it out on top of one of the propellers. Black Widow tries to convince Viper that, regardless of her political views, she is going to cause the death of many innocent people. But of course, the Viper isn't interested, and the helicarrier continues on its descent. Look, that's the rapidly approaching Washington DC in the background. And in case you're thinking, Nancy Rushman's doing pretty well for herself, well, that's because facing the woman that caused her so much anguish, Natasha Romanoff's true persona has fully returned and is back in control. Spider-Man and Nick Fury are still struggling with the circuit board, and as the streets of DC grow ever closer, Nick Fury says he has one last chance to get it right. The battle outside has reached its climax as the Black Widow knocks Viper over the edge of the propeller. The Widow says she's changed. When she was younger, she would have let Viper fall to her death, but not now, and she holds out her hand to help up her enemy. But it seems that Nick Fury's last chance did work, and before the Widow can pull up her enemy, the propeller starts, and Viper, not wishing to lose her arm, lets go, and she falls, never to be seen again. Well, not for 2 years anyway. With the helicarrier back to full power, it stops just shy of destroying the Capitol, something which President Carter is particularly relieved about. And then we see that, surprise surprise, Shang-Chi wasn't dead. He deflected Viper's bullet off of his wristband and then pretended to be dead because he knew how important it was for the Widow to face down her enemy alone, to find her true self. Yeah, I know, I can pick holes in that as well, but let's not spoil a happy ending. Actually, it's not an entirely happy ending, because with the Black Widow's memories fully restored, she no longer has a romantic interest in Spider-Man. That really was Nancy's thing. And as she watches Spider-Man, yes, with his web parachute, she thinks about him. It's not that she didn't like him, but she has chosen the road she has chosen. And that is a road that she must fly alone. Especially since the Champions disbanded.
That was pretty good, wasn't it? For a Marvel team-up. Even the out-of-place Shang-Chi gave us a good fight. Next up, Spidey crossed paths with some real A-listers. The Guardians of the Galaxy. Well, we think that now, but back then they were pretty low down the alphabet. I remember hearing that Marvel were planning on making a Guardians of the Galaxy movie and thinking, wow, they're really scraping the bottom of the barrel now. Well, it seems I was wrong, in more ways than one. But back in 1979, it was a very different story, and actually a totally different team. Chris Claremont is still writing, but Bob McLeod is fulfilling art duties on this one. In it, we see Spider-Man trying to help to basically keep the very existence of the Guardians a secret from the wider public. This is after a reporter gets footage of the futuristic heroes. By the end of the issue, the reporter swears revenge on Spider-Man, but we never see him again. Imagine how much this issue would cost now if it was that reporter that had gone on to wear the Venom costume and not Eddie Brock. We also see the successor to Moses Magnum as the head of the shady DRC, the Deterrence Research Corporation. He's hidden in shadows throughout the issue and is then never seen again. Like, not even referred to again. Ever. The Black Panther was drafted in for issue 87, which saw Stephen Grant's first story for the series. This was a fill-in issue, and boy, did it feel like it. We get a classic misunderstanding as Spider-Man challenges T'Challa in the Wakandan embassy after he thinks the Black Panther has kidnapped an entrepreneur who has just completed a shonky deal that has rinsed the African nation of $500 million. Well, not only was that not the Black Panther, instead it was a disposable villain called Hellraiser, but the dodgy entrepreneur turned out to be so dodgy that he was behind his own fake kidnap, as were Roxxon. The Invisible Girl Before She Became a Woman features in issue 88, in which Spidey helps to rescue Franklin Richards. And then we get Chris Claremont's final issue, where we find him on very familiar ground with Nightcrawler, in a tale where he and Spider-Man take turns saving each other's lives from an assassin called Cutthroat. Although that was Chris's last issue, he did have plans for another Marvel team-up story. One that featured the Angel and took both of our heroes to the Savage Land. However, the art by the Micronauts Michael Golden wasn't finished on time. So the story was shelved and Chris left the title. That story would re-emerge a few years later though as the curtain raiser for the new Marvel Fanfare series. We round out this batch with an appearance from the Beast, as he and the Wallcrawler take on Killer Shrike and the Modular Man. Wow, what a pairing. This was only the Modular Man's second ever appearance, and he dies at the end. But don't worry, because they always bring back the best characters. Oh, no, that's it. He's dead. This is another one of those issues that seems to have caught the writer unawares. This time it's Stephen Grant with his second story of the series. As in just 3 panels, we see the Modular Man die, Killer Shrike escape, and Spider-Man say, just let him go. The Beast doesn't get much of a say in it. Run out of pages, did you, Stephen?